Thanks for joining us. This is Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
You're listening to the Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, today we're talking about being ready in a hurry.
I know a thing or two about that. my whole fucking life.
It really seems like every year when we come down to competition time, and not even just the UCC, just any competition that we deal with, guys are always on the last minute.
Well, and I think too that even if you plan ahead, like, take my own personal side out of the equation. I just did a motor in one of my vehicles, right? Yeah. I planned since August. The car just got back together. We're recording, this. We're 3 weeks into April? Yeah. The car just got back together last week. So that's 7-8 months worth when the car should have been done in a couple. And when guys do these builds, they're relying on other support, other machine shops, other parts to be shipped in, all of these things. And no matter what, it's crunch time. It comes down to the last second.
Chris, you had a great quote back on the podcast when you were a guest for, I believe, one of the budget build episodes where you said, whatever you have for a budget for your build, double it, crumple that paper in half, or crumple that paper up and throw it out, because you really have no idea.
Timeline falls right in line with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so getting ready in a hurry is something that every competitor deals with, whether it's like scraping together tires right before you go drag race, or whether it's throwing those last parts on and you're up until 2 a.m. the night before a big race. Guys are always in a big hurry to get things done. There's a lot of good that comes out of that, because I think we really see people sometimes perform their best when they're under pressure. Yeah. And then there's also problems that come from that. And that kind of leads me into today's do's and don'ts with Exergy Performance. Of course, Exergy has been a lifetime sponsor of the show. We've talked about Exergy, and we've talked to Rick, and we've talked to Randy over there. They're doing great things. And I think one of the really cool things they're getting into, Chris, is the 10 millimeter CP4 pump. Yeah. Something a lot of guys really never thought of. They were just pulling them out and putting CP3s in. Exergy said, why?
Yeah, it's innovative. Let's take a more simplistic approach, to something where you can still see all the benefits. It's less laborsome to install. Yep. And it's still it's good for either option, whether you want to be on the dark side, go emissions delete, you want to be on the bright side of things, emissions compliant. It's a pump that's versatile for multiple applications.
Reliability and performance. Yep. I mean, that's usually you don't need much more than that out of an aftermarket part.
No, sir.
So Exergy's advice for this week for their do's and don'ts, I'll jump in and do the do here. Get tuning after installing 30% or larger injectors.
Yeah, that's pretty much a staple for what we, practice over at the shop.
I mean, we're tuners, so I guess we have that as a mandate in our head, right? You have to get the tuning. But I don't know how many guys call in and say, hey, I put these injectors in 3 months ago. Do you think I should get a tune? And it's you did a 8 to 20-hour job, depending on what truck, what year, and how much of a pain in the ass it was. So you had to put some planning into that. Yep. You had to think through, what am I going to do? When am I going to drive this? How fast is it going to be done? Put in the plans to finish the job, and that's getting the tunes done.
I think a lot of people lose sight of that, or they run a box programmer and they do a bigger set of injectors, and they'll call in and the truck just drives like shit. Well, what's done to the truck? Well, it's got 30 overs, 45 overs, and it has a PP accelerator programmer. The amount of injector on time that tuner runs is now multiplied
by 30%,
right? Or 45 or 60 or whatever. So you're gonna hear some aggressive sounds out of the engine. The truck's gonna be smoky. The EGTs are gonna be out of control. Be smart with this stuff, guys. Tuning is a big, big, big part of this. And if you're investing money into a set of injectors for your engine and you want it to run right, you're going to go bigger in injector. You're going to want to invest in the custom tuning to counter that.
Absolutely. Finish the job, man. Make sure that you weren't in so much of a hurry to get back on the road. You caused detrimental damage down the road.
I'll do the don't. So don't forget to change your oil in an LB7 after doing an injector replacement job.
Why is that, Chris?
Oh, man. There's a debris that gets into the engine or a potential of. You don't know, why did you replace the injectors in the first place? Was there fuel getting into the crankcase? There's a lot of different things. I would like to go a little bit more broader with this. Anytime you're going to do a turbocharger replacement or you're going to do an injector replacement on any of these trucks, it's a good common practice to just change the oil.
You're there.
It's what, $60 for the filter, $70 for the filter. Like it's a no-brainer. With my luck, I would get debris in one of the in something in the motor, and I would screw myself.
Well, I think you made a really good point as well, especially on, and I think that's why I drew this one up as an LB7, because I don't know how many times we've diagnosed the injectors based on pulling the dipstick.
Yeah, fuel in the crankcase.
And it doesn't matter how much, how little. Yep. If you got fuel in the crankcase, change the fucking oil.
Yep.
Like you said, it's $60, man.
Yep.
Come on.
Absolutely.
You want to be cheap, you could drive a gasser. All right, awesome. So keeping along with the theme of ready in a hurry, we find a lot of guys are in a hurry and they end up in limp mode. whether it's a true limp mode because of like something transmission related or fuel pressure related, or whether it's just because something's fucked up. Beyond that, sometimes it's hard to tell. But limp mode, or officially it's called derate mode, is a topic we covered on the Diesel Insights videos over at Duramax Tuner and Calibrated Power.
Yeah. So why is limp mode good? Why is it good, Paul?
Well, it's a protection mode.
Okay.
So what it's saying is the computer has detected something out of spec, but your engine isn't blown up and your transmission isn't blown up, and we don't want it to.
Okay. So it's a safety precaution more than anything.
You got it.
I'm just sitting there thinking, I remember when I had my 03 LB7, I was driving to the mall. Trans was roached, went in the limp mode, and I ended up calling a buddy, and I'm like, dude, the trans, I had no idea what was going on. He's like, cycle the key a couple times, it'll pop right out. Dude, that ignition got worked after that, let me tell you. So a couple quick fixes for that. You cycle the key 3 times. It'll pop it out of limp mode.
And you can get home.
Yeah, and then you can get home or just beat on it again. Yeah, like the one customer service rep that we have, we call him Travis at the shop. His name's Anthony. Again, 03 LB7. He sends me Snapchats like, dude, limp mode again. Like gets to that 80, 85, 90 mile an hour. He's like, oh, it didn't hit limp mode this time. Like he runs the truck. And you can also clear the codes with a monitor, or if you have a tuner that can support the reading and clearing of DTCs, and get yourself out of limp mode that way.
The crucial point there being read the fucking codes first.
Yeah. Please.
Read the code. Calling into any shop anywhere on earth and saying, my truck went into limp mode, what do? Their only response will be, what codes does it have? Because there's so many things that can cause it.
And then I'm going to tell you, well, let me pull up Google and let me Google those codes.
Right.
Like, most people have cell phones these days. You can Google that. Like, you have a better understanding of what the codes are before you call the shop to get better advice.
Have you been seeing these memes with the guys from... What's the old motorcycle shop?
Yes.
Custom choppers. They're yelling.
Well, that's like my famous quote to guys when they call in. I'm not being disrespectful, but it's like, what do these codes mean? Well, look them up. Google. I'm going to do the same thing on my end. So, and some of the codes, it's just they're generic. You hear them all the time. So 3 of the guys in the office are like, dude, this is you. Like, this is you. And I'm like, God, I'm a pile of shit.
True story.
But yeah, it's true.
Yeah, absolutely. And that takes us down the line of, if you're in limp mode and you're not a mechanic, get it to a shop. Yeah. Just don't fuck around. Going on Facebook and Google, they'll point you in the right direction, but they're not going to fix the truck. If you don't have the tools to fix the truck, get it to somebody who can.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Done.
This week from Facebook, Chris, we actually pulled in our producer, Justin Tyson, to read us off a couple of comments and questions we had on a Facebook post from Duramax Tuner. So we posted a picture of Jason Wehrli from WC Fab's regular cab 2016 3500. I knew the 3500
single rear wheel.
It's got his twin turbo kit. So it's called the DT LML twin turbo kit. Yep. It's an emissions equipped twin turbo kit with an S300 atmospheric charger over your stock charger. It looks like the factory put it in. Yep. It actually has less install time than any other twin turbo kit we've ever provided. Mm-hmm. It's a really, really cool truck, and it's got a few other perks, right? So it's got the 10 mil CP4 from Exergy. And
lift pump. It's got a converter in the trans. It's a turnkey 640 horse truck.
It is.
At the end of the day.
And it's dope as fuck. Yeah, and it's so light, it's fun to drive.
And it's quiet.
It is.
I love quiet trucks now. I'm sorry.
It's crazy.
I'm getting old.
So we posted a picture of this truck. You can check it out on the Facebook for Duramax Tuner. And it blew up with like a million questions. Mm-hmm. Thank God for Jason Wehrli. He was actually checking Facebook over the weekend. I posted it here Friday at like 3 o'clock right before we podcasted, and I just turned my phone off for the weekend.
Typical.
So I come back to like 48 comments, and half of them are Jason replying to guys. Yep. So at any rate, we had Justin Tyson come in and read off a couple of those questions. Let's hear the first one now.
How does this twin kit compare with doing your Stealth single turbo for the LML? Running your switchable tunes now, 2016 model.
Okay, Chris. So they're asking about the difference between a Stealth and the twin turbos. Mm-hmm. Go.
Put me on the spot. One of the things that, we've seen in our R&D is, the single turbocharger is definitely going to help support the power, but it's not providing the maximum airflow throughout the whole RPM window. So when we're talking about for an example, regen cycles, okay? Yeah. Jason's truck, we've gone 800, 900 miles in between regen frequencies. And that's just because of the air volume that is being supplied into the engine.
And it's funny you say it, because I had somebody reply back to almost that post saying, oh, sure, force a bunch of air and power through this system and see it clean up. But that's actually true.
No, that is actually true.
So how a diesel works is a balance between fuel and air. Yep. As we increase the amount of air, the less smoke we have on the other side.
Which is less soot to build up in the DPF given a specific amount of miles, which it's less taxing on the DPF. To me, it's a healthier running engine.
It is.
Just the whole system. The Stealth is a great option. It's more simplistic. Installs a little bit more aggressive, but it's a nice option to go with. But I think for the guy that's going to be towing, the guy that might be at higher altitudes and lower altitudes, the guy that's going to use his truck for what a truck's general purpose is, I think the compounds are a great route to go. For a guy that might be doing more sled pulling where he's limited in the turbocharger, then the Stealth, the single drop-in is great for the application. So
sure.
More or less like what the budget allows for, I would say more than anything. You're not wrong for going either route.
Yeah, I would say purpose of the truck and future goals.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it always drills into, right? Okay, we got another question. Let's hear it from Justin.
Twins and only 640? Thought the LML could hit that with the Stealth and your tunes.
All right, I'm going to jump on this one. You're absolutely correct. You totally can hit 640 horsepower on a Stealth 64 for the LMLs. You also will see 640 horsepower out of the twin turbo kit, assuming you have stock injectors.
Yep.
And so that's what we're showing here, is that it doesn't really matter what turbo setup you put on. If you push the truck to the edge of its stock injectors, we know an absolute max on those injectors is 640.
Yep. We
would probably prefer to set up a customer's daily driver truck around 600, maybe 620 at the most. Yeah. If you're dyno tuning and you're here in person and we can use the twins to make sure the truck is nice and cool, that 640 we would feel a lot more comfortable with it as tuners go. Mm-hmm. On a single, on the Stealth 64, pushing it to 640, we're using everything we got out of it. Yep. We're at the ceiling on everything. So if you want to go bigger than that, you're going to need a bigger turbo and bigger injectors. So that's kind of the difference between hitting 640 with twins and hitting 640 with a single. Yep. Back to Justin.
So Duramax tuner, with stock exhaust, I'm guessing it still has full emissions intact?
Yes. Full emissions intact. Stock is stock and look, right? Unless you pop the hood, it is a factory DPF, EGR, SCR, all of it's still in factory operation. It's still all there.
Also, it does not... I'm sorry, we'll kick it over to the next question. Perfect. That's totally correct.
How often are you having to fill the DEF tank with all the extra exhaust flow? I'm sure the NOx ppm must be a lot higher.
Okay, and what I was about to add on there, but I wanted to let him ask the question first, it does not use more DEF.
No.
As we increase the airflow, we're not necessarily increasing NOx. Now, ppm is measured by the NOx sensors. They're going to go through DEF usage. Mm-hmm. We have not seen any increase in DEF usage, which has been really surprising for some guys. And then our last question of the day.
Is that with factory intercooler? What about mileage?
Factory intercooler. Yes, it is. So there has been no alterations to the intercooler on that truck. What about mileage? The truck, it's a regular cab. It's a little bit lighter on a stock tire. I would never sell any component or recommend any of these components to help improve fuel economy. Okay?
But it also didn't lose any.
It didn't lose any. Now it's all about how you drive the truck, Paul. It's all about how you drive the truck. Because when I had the truck, I had fun with it. Thanks, Jason. But, a truck like that to average 17, 18 miles to the gallon mixed driving scenario, that's not uncommon. That's what we would expect to see out of a truck like that.
Yeah, so absolutely. Absolutely. So, guys, thanks a lot for all of the questions and engagement there on Facebook. Feel free to reach out to us at the Duramax Tuner Facebook page, the Calibrated Power, or most preferably Diesel Performance Podcast. Send us a message. We'd love to talk to you more about your trucks and your questions. Industry news. We're going to do something a little bit different here, Chris. Usually I take like one of their featured articles with like a really cool truck. We just talk a little bit about it. Or we've also pulled up all of the trucks that are up for voting at Diesel Power Challenge. We'll be doing that here in the near future. For today, though, they had this really fucking awesome article by Mike McLaughlin. This was published in their April 2018 issue. It's LBZ water pump replacement in 4 hours. Now, I'm going to set that up. This is, if you're not familiar with like an LBZ water pump,
it's a nightmare.
8 to 12 hours is what guys will tell you. And usually I hear guys quote way higher than 8 hours. Yeah. They usually are more in that 12-hour range for sure. And if you're doing it at home, we call it a weekend.
Yeah. Well, that's with a buddy and a case of beer. So
right. Yeah. Right. Maybe a couple cases.
Over a couple days.
Right. So there's a whole great breakdown. They walk you through this article literally step by step, what they did, every little piece of it, and some really good pictures along the way. But they also provide 6 quick tips and time-saving measures. Chris, why don't you hit us with number 1?
So you don't have to pull the starter like GM book says.
Number 2, contrary to what GM book states, you don't have to remove the thermostat crossover.
Number 3, mark the harmonic balancer before you remove it. This way you won't install it backwards when it's time to put it back together on the crankshaft.
Number 4, carefully break the seal between the pump and engine's front cover when removing the original water pump. There's an O-ring present in the nearby coolant to oil cooler tube that you don't want to disturb.
Number 5, water pump replacement is an
opportune.
Opportune? What is opportune?
This would be an opportune time for you to read it correctly.
Gotcha. Well, there you go. I feel like an idiot. Number 5, edit that out. Number 5, water pump replacement is an opportune time to install new thermostats.
Number 6, inspect and replace any questionable radiator hoses or O-rings.
If I ever need to replace a water pump on an LBZ, I will pull up the April 2018 Diesel Power Magazine to read the rest of the article there.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for Diesel Power Magazine and Mike McLaughlin for putting that one out there. I think readers are going to really love it. Guys, today we do have another special treat for you. Of course, it's our featured interview sponsored by Duramax Tuner. Today we have on somebody who I think is going to make a real big impact at UCC Qualifier bracket, Ryan Phaff. Ryan, how the hell are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us and our listeners today to talk a little bit about a pretty badass truck that you're bringing to the Ultimate Callout Challenge this year.
You betcha. It's good to be on the show today.
Yeah. Always glad to have a nice Canadian on the phone with us, talking to our listeners a little bit about crossing the border to play with the Americans down here in our big rowdy event at Ultimate Callout Challenge 2018.
He's representing the Big White North.
Yeah, I got to leave the snow so we can go play.
Hey, with the fucking weather we're having, there might be snow here too, so. Oh, shit.
Hopefully not. That's a long drive.
Ryan, before we get too far into it, we always ask our guests if you could tell our listeners a little bit about how you got started in diesel performance.
I guess out of high school already, I had a diesel. I actually started with a Ford 6-liter and had the classic 6-liter problems with it, and I traded in on a Dodge, and a couple trucks later, just keep modifying them, and it just seemed easy for me to do, so it was just became something that was a passion that I liked doing.
Okay. So you come from the Ford 6-liter world. I think a lot of guys, they start with a Ford. I know I did. A lot of my buddies did. What led you into like the Cummins platform, which, we're going to talk about it later in the show, but what made you, want to work off of that foundation?
At the time, that was like 2007-ish,
okay.
2008. At the time then, I guess the Dodge guys were just making way more power easier, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's true.
And I knew a few guys around here in Canada that were drag racing, that were actually 9-second trucks already back then, four-wheel drive trucks, and just kind of looked up to those guys. So that's kind of, I guess, they influenced me to go that way.
That makes sense. That seems to be a really common story, right? As we start to look around at who's around us and who's making power, who has the truck that we want to have, and then we go after it. So then we start to build our trucks and start to adopt those platforms. And it is. I mean, we were just talking the other week about guys who are looking at the Ford platform and considering dollar per horsepower. So some of that practicality that Chris and I are a big fan of. As you got into diesel, you had mentioned drag racing. I seem to see drag racing as a really common theme throughout all of your Facebook page and all your posts and things like that. Obviously, you have some experience on the strip. How about in the dirt? Have you done some sled pulling up there?
Not really, no. Just a few times with our dually, our puller truck that we use to haul the trailer and stuff. So it's only a mild 700 horse truck. So it'll be a completely different thing for me to do. It'll just be a shot in the dark kind of to pull with 2,000 plus horsepower, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I know you have some experience on the dyno. Do you go to a lot of like just dyno events, or do you only dyno the truck to tune it?
No, up here there's quite a few dyno events a year up here. And I've been going to them quite steady. It's mainly up here. There's just drag racing and dyno events. The pulling scene is kind of faded away up here, so and at my hometown, it's a NHRA certified track here. So that's why I stick to drag racing. I guess it's only 5 minutes from my house, so it's pretty easy to go down to the track and race.
Well, when it's convenient.
Yeah, dynoing I've been doing for a couple of years now anyways, for sure.
Okay. Do you have a strategy that helps you on the dyno? Can you kind of explain to some of our newer listeners, like, what do you have to know when you're getting on the dyno with your truck?
Well, I guess you have to know where your truck makes power, like where it comes into boost and what RPM it likes to start at. Like with me now, with my big chargers and stuff, we're spraying nitrous before we're ever even into load or doing anything, just to get them to light and to do that. So, I mean, when you go up, they're going to ask you what you want the dyno to be loaded at, and you don't want to go too much load, or it'll just pull the truck down if you don't have enough power. Even if you do, you'll just do a big burnout on the rollers because tires give. But yeah, you have to know where your truck. You just have to be comfortable with your truck, I guess. And if it doesn't work the first pull, you can always try again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the theory. I mean, at UCC, I think you only get 30 minutes to figure out your best dyno number, and most guys that I remember were squeaking 2, maybe 3 passes out of that 30 minutes because the truck needs to cool down in between. You know, you can't deal with it running 3 2,000 horsepower passes back to back.
Nitrous,
yeah, I mean,
spray.
after your heat soaks, you won't make as much power, so you kind of gotta have a game plan on the way up there, like. You want to do only one pull if you can, and make that big number, and just to save the truck too.
Yep.
You can only make 2,000 plus horsepower so many times, right?
Yeah, very true.
Well, that's it. You know, I think a lot of guys forget that just because your foot's on the floor and in 4th gear doesn't necessarily mean you're applying 2,000 horsepower to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of other things that go in it. So it is interesting to see guys who, like Rudy's, who got smoked on the dyno last year and things like that, where they had to do a total engine swap to get to the next competition. For you, I think it's time that we dive in. Ryan, can you tell our listeners about the truck that you're bringing to the UCC Qualifier this year?
It's a 2012 4th gen Dodge 3500. It's a 4-door short box, so that's kind of rare compared to what somebody would pick to make a race truck out of, right?
Yeah,
it's a little new.
It's still a full steel truck with aluminum floor in it. It's 850 cert. It has a 6.4 liter deck plate motor in it that we built in house in our shop. triple Garrett turbochargers on it. It's got a Armor Inc. 48 RE kit transmission in it with a standalone harness and stuff. So we're running a 5.9 ECM in this truck.
Okay.
Just to make more feel and more RPM than the 2012 6.7 ECM made before. Other than that, it's just a back half truck. Basically just a full race truck. It looks normal on the outside, so I open my door and look inside or look under the box cover.
Now, what do you have? Like, we kind of talked about, triple Garrett turbochargers, 6.4 deck plate motor. What's the fuel setup on the truck? As far as injector size, injection pumps, how many injection pumps, that kind of thing.
It's all the fuel system's 100% dynamite diesel.
Okay.
It's their, I don't even know what you'd call how big the injectors are. It's some of the biggest that Lenny's ever made.
So just garden hoses, right?
Pretty much, yeah. Like he only puts one in his test stand and tests them one at a time, kind of deal, right? So they're big. And then triple 12 mil dynamite pumps as well.
Wow. So you're coming to party.
3 12 mil pumps, 3 turbos. I dig it. How big are those Garretts?
They're 2 88 mils. GTX is feeding a 98 mil.
Okay, so for the listeners, it's a 98 millimeter manifold charger feeding 288 as the atmospherics.
Yeah.
Cool.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's
so now
we've seen down the track 175 plus pounds.
I just laugh when I hear that,
right? I was like, that can't be right. Yeah. And then the data log through a bit. So.
And the truck made it down the end of the track, and it was able to shut off and restart.
Yeah. 175 PSI.
We suffered we were just, the last test we did, we went down to industrial and dynoed down there, and we had the air-to-water cooler exploded on us down there, so we swapped that out for a little bit better unit. So another good problem we found before UCC anyways.
Yeah, that was pretty recent. I actually wanted to walk through a bit of a timeline here. Did a little bit of research for tonight's episode, and I noticed
it was Facebook stalking. Don't even bullshit.
Yeah, it sounds better when I say research.
You stalked.
Yeah,
you
clearly.
Stalked. All the way back from 8/2 of 2017.
Yeah. Check.
Most people they share things, post things, whatever. You went through.
Ryan catalogs his Facebook post really well with hashtags.
Well, you learned that because you stalked him.
Right. So all I had to do was go to his page and search hashtag UCC 2018.
Okay.
So it was super simple. It was not. I did not have to put a lot of effort into my stalking.
Ryan, that's pretty slick, man. I like that.
It was really nice on my end, so I appreciated that. So I went back. So August 2nd, 2017, you were officially announced as a UCC qualifier. And then just a few days later, I found on August 13th, you posted that you went 157 miles an hour, which was your previous personal best.
Whoa, in a crew cab short bed.
Yes.
Wow.
Was the interior stripped and all aluminum floor pan, all of that, at the time when you went over 150 miles an hour?
No. Interior was stripped, but no aluminum anything. Full 100% steel truck.
Wow.
Yeah. I was pretty fucking impressed there. Yeah. This is the beginning of my timeline.
This is the beginning of me being
second
impressed.
Post.
Ryan's a badass, hands down.
That's 8:13. 9:24, I see you on a dyno posting 1,858 horsepower. Immediately, I'm like, that's a solid UCC qualifier truck.
I mean, that's a solid UCC competitor truck.
Right. Were you spraying? Do you know the post I'm talking about? Do you remember that dyno event?
I do, yeah. I sprayed only 2 kicks there, and I had only 5 injectors working at that time.
So
Canadian exchange rate, man. What did I tell you? Couldn't get all the cylinders, man.
1,800 horse. I was on 5 cylinders. What's up?
Right. With only 2 sprays.
I didn't know that at the time, but after the fact, we found that out looking at the data log and stuff.
Okay.
So.
Well,
that's funny. So I'll skip my next post. So then I'm going to kick us over to 10:18. So this is 9:24, 1,800 horsepower on 5 cylinders. We call that the Canadian Exchange. 1018, there's an engine assembled with turbos on a stand looking like it's ready to go in a truck.
Yeah, because he fucking burnt up a cylinder at 1,800 horse.
To flip that around, did you really flip that engine around in less than 30 days?
Oh, yeah.
Who is your machine shop?
He is.
Oh, my God. In a month.
In less than a month.
Just needed a quick hone. It was good.
That's
You're
impressive.
talking about 3 weeks. I actually went and pulled up my calendar and I had to scroll back to be like, this was 3 weeks.
Wow.
Okay, so that's October. So in October, you're like, nah, engine's done, turbo's back on it, whatever. So then here's November 25th, just over a month later. I find pictures of full cage, full sheet metal interior, full race truck. Yeah. And the post isn't like working on it, almost there. It's like, done with this, one of a million things to get ready for UCC. We're literally doing interviews at this point with people who haven't even put an engine in a truck yet.
Well, I don't have very much time. You gotta hurry if you want to get it all done. Ready.
I mean, you want to test it too. I mean, you're clearly ahead of curve.
So then in December, I see all the fab work, all the suspension is done. Everything. The truck's ready for an engine at this point. I mean, wiring. Okay, so then you fall off for January. I just want to know, like, between August 2nd and January, what motivated you to get this shit done so quickly?
Well, I know the UCC is the beginning of May already, right? So, I mean, I wanted to test and wanted to make sure. I'm usually, like, the last couple of years, it's been like the night before I'm want to go to the track, we're putting the motor in kind of deal. So I didn't want to be like that this year because it's kind of important to be ready for, I think, for UCC as best as we can, right? So, I mean, I just was out of the game, I guess. As soon as I entered in it, I thought, well, we better get going on it, be ready.
Okay.
I was wildly impressed. For 4 months of work, I feel like you did what most guys do in probably the whole year.
Yeah.
Just right there. I mean, this truck, like you said, it was maybe not full interior, but I mean, it was nowhere near the same truck it is today. Did the turbo setup change or injector setup change when you went from that 1,800 horsepower pull to February, where you were now doing the wiring? February 16th, all wiring done.
Yeah.
Turbo setup stayed the same. I didn't make any changes there. Injector setup and pump setup, yeah. I only had 2 pumps on last year, only 2 12 mils. So we stuffed another one on there, and then the injectors got quite a bit bigger again than they were last year. So
okay.
So 216.
Way less microseconds to make more horsepower now.
Fucking nitrous happy.
So 216 wiring's done. 223, just a few days later, engine's installed, truck is running. I feel like that's a pretty normal time. For once the wiring's done, you're there, right? Like now you have that drive. That's like, we're going to just work nights to get this done.
But I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
You literally got the engine installed and running on the 23rd. And then 3 days later, you make over 2,000 horsepower.
At industrial injection. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
On your way to the ATS diesel event. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. We ran down to Salt Lake, dynoed, made sure everything was good, come home, made a couple changes a couple things we found bad, and then straight down to ATS.
And then ATS is where you blew up the air-to-water intercooler and were 175 PSI.
No, that was at industrial.
That was at industrial.
Come home.
That was in between the two. Now I understand.
Yeah.
Now I
Yeah, I
understand.
quickly come home and gusseted it back together, cut it open, welded the inside up, gusseted it all back together, and prayed at ATS that it stayed in one piece.
What happened at the ATS event?
I only did one pull with my normal one and done kind of thing, and it spun unbelievably bad on the dyno. And then I was going to make another pull, but it ended up popping the freeze plug out of the back of the oil rail in the block. so it instantly pumped all the oil out of the back of the motor.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And it didn't burn anything else up?
There's no damage, but it just kind of sucked. I had to pull the tranny, and I pipe capped it now and put a pipe cap in instead, so I won't have that problem twice.
What a wild ride. I literally cannot believe how quickly you were able to completely transform this truck. I mean, it's not like it was a slouch before. We're not talking about a stock truck and threw everything at it at once. I mean, you had it at 1,800 horsepower. How long has your truck had these triples on it?
They went on last year. So I went one season with them. And I had some issues here and there and just bugs that trying to work out, and we didn't really get them completely resolved. But I ran a 919 last year and that good mile per hour last year a couple times, and that was as good as we could do last year. But this year we got those bugs worked out now, and I think everything will go way smoother for sure.
Okay. Now, have you taken the truck to the track this year yet?
No.
Okay.
No. There's still snow up here.
Okay. Well, I mean,
minus 20 degrees.
You travel into the U.S. 18 times a month, so I figured it was worth a shot.
No. UCC will be the first time it goes down the track.
Wow.
This year, so.
Wow. Okay.
You feel pretty good then after your dyno experiences, or maybe get it on the rollers one time before then, or just the way it sits right now, you're shipping it?
Yeah, no, it's going to go straight on, I guess. Well, I can't remember which event's first, but I think the dyno's first, and yeah, we're going to put it straight on there and hit it with all it's got anyways. See what happens.
Well, that brings me into talking about the changes for each event. And one of the biggest things that we see guys swapping in and out are tires. So for the dyno, they're going to have one set for the track and then for the dirt. Do you mind sharing with our listeners what's your plan for tires through these three events?
For the dyno, I have speed-rated Cooper. They're like an all-terrain kind of tire. But I went with speed-rated tires. They're a little harder. They're a little harder to get traction. But I've seen what tires flying off do on the dyno, so that's why I put them on for that. And then for the drag strip, I go to 16-inch wheels by 10 wide, and then we're going to run H&M slicks on it, which I had never ran before. We ran Hoosier DR2, like a drag radial last year, so that'll be a pretty big change. I'm assuming the truck's probably going to hopefully launch better, more traction, but not sure how it'll handle steering-wise and stuff. But and then for pulling, we're going to go to duals, 35-inch mud grapplers in the front, and then 35-inch Trixis tires in the back, but in a dual configuration, so 6 tires.
Who coached you through the sled pulling tires?
Donovan from Armor Inc. Is my biggest help with this truck for sure when it comes to when I have questions for like sled pulling for sure, because I have not any experience in that, right? So he's a big help there for sure.
I'm so excited for you, man, to be in 2,000 horsepower your first time hooking to a sled. What a ride.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it's going to go, but I'm glad it's the last event.
Now with you doing, so from the last time you were at the drag strip, you've lightened the truck up, put a cage in, fab work, suspension work, like all of these things. Have you do you plan on at least making like test hits or something, like launching the truck, seeing how it hooks up, or you're literally just going there blindly saying whatever happens, happens?
The truck chassis-wise didn't really change.
Okay.
Suspension-wise, that's pretty much the same.
Okay.
It's just weight-wise that we lost a bunch of weight. I'm hoping it's in all the right places where it acts exactly the same, but there'll be no test passes. Okay. It'll be straight off the trailer. We'll start it. 1,800 horse or whatever and see how it likes it.
Why have you chosen that strategy, Ryan?
What's that, sorry?
Why have you chosen that strategy?
I'm confident in the truck, the chassis-wise. I know it makes power now safely, I guess, without pieces flying off and stuff. So I'm not really too worried about the drag racing. I guess I'm confident in it. That and the dyno doesn't bother me. The sled pulling is the one that I'm definitely nervous about, for sure.
That seems to be really common with a lot of the competitors that we've interviewed. They come from a really big either drag racing background or the dyno circuit background, and it's like not many guys have a lot of experience in the sled pull arena, I feel.
Well, I do feel like that's one of the things that makes this competition such an equalizer in the industry, because it's pulling people, and like there's not really a lot of competitors out there who have a ton of experience on both sides of dirt and strip. You know, most guys do tend to find one and run with it and have a passion for it, and they have to get out of their comfort zone and get into the sled pull side of it. But it has been interesting of how many guys are drag racers and then they sled pull for their first time at UCC. Yeah. I know Mike Graves last year was hilarious. Truck, I mean, shit's flying off the truck. He's got it held up over his head. I think he said it was one of the most exciting things he'd ever done in a truck and things like that. It's exhilarating, and I always poke at sled pulling about how dull it is to do 30 miles an hour as your top speed when, these guys are doing 157 miles an hour when he was 200 horsepower less. I think it's going to be a real shock to everybody. I wish you guys got more than one pull. I think this year just one pull, right?
Yeah, it's only one, so you kind of have to get it right out of the gate. For sure.
I really do feel like that's going to come down to be like one of those things that kind of has a deciding factor over the whole field, especially for the qualifiers. Sure. As we talk about the qualifiers, obviously the big point here is to rank in the top 5 so that you get a guaranteed spot in the UCC competitor bracket next year. Where do you think you're going to fall?
I don't know. I haven't seen everybody's truck, but I have seen a couple of the guys that have faster chassis certs than I have and stuff, and I'm confident to make it into that top 5 for sure. There's not, I guess if everything goes good and nothing breaks, that's the only thing. If the truck does what it does, then I'm confident we'll be in that top 5 for sure.
I mean, not to take anything away from the other competitors, but it's one of the things that you seem to do well with, Ryan, is documenting everything and your successes, but you have a lot of experience with a high horsepower truck. You didn't just build a high horsepower truck for the UCC competitor list this year. You've had a high horsepower truck. You have a lot of seat time with that truck. You've been 157 miles an hour at a 9.1, you said. So, I mean, dyno pulls and all these things. So, I mean, this is a truck like you're kind of seasoned in the sense of you have that experience already.
Yeah, I mean, the truck is, it's not, I'm very comfortable in it, I guess. So I just took a truck that did well in the other 2 events and just made it sled pull, basically, is what we did, kind of, and tried to put strength back in it so it doesn't become 2 pieces when we sled pull with it anyway.
What other competitors are you looking out for? Who do you think is going to be in that top 5 bracket with you?
It could be anybody, right? There's some other trucks that are coming that are old diesel power challenge guys from last year. And, I mean, we could come and make 2,500 horsepower and break during drag racing or whatever and not even make it to the last 2 events, right? So, I mean, it's hard to say who's going to be there. Charlie Keeter is a guy that could be, just because he has a good all-around truck, right? He won't make a huge horsepower in the dyno or whatever, but there's these other guys that have 750 cert trucks that if everything goes good, and they could beat everybody too, right? It's just going to be, I think you have to have a bit of luck for sure to get into the top 5.
I've been told there's no such thing as luck. It's all about skill, my friend.
Yeah. No, there's luck here for sure.
I agree with you 100%.
Awesome. Who do you want to give some shout-outs to?
All the crew at Armor Inc., Lenny and Brian from Dynamite, Ryan from Exergy Performance, Jared from Breakout Tuning, Zane Dallas, and all the guys from H&S Motorsports. And I mean, everybody that's helped me. The dealer community is pretty awesome, so I've got help from lots of guys. Too many to name, that's for sure.
Well, that's awesome. I definitely appreciate you carving out some of your very busy time, Ryan, to talk with our listeners. If anybody wants to follow up with you and follow the truck, how can they find you?
I'm on Instagram as Phaff, PHAFF, that's probably the best place to follow me if you want. I have no secrets with the truck. Secrets don't win races, I don't think, so it's all there for you to see if you want.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan and Phaff Fab. This has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
Thanks for listening.
The Diesel Performance Podcast is brought to you by Calibrated Power Solutions, home of DuramaxTuner.com. Calibrated Power develops emissions-equipped calibrations for a wide variety of diesel powertrains, including Duramax, Cummins, Power Stroke, John Deere, Case, New Holland, and many more. For more information and the best customer service in the industry, check out calibratedpower.com or call 815-568-7920. That's 815-568-7920. If you'd like to contact the podcast, send us a message through Facebook or email Paul at DuramaxTuner.com or Chris at CEHMKE@DuramaxTuner.com. Hey, thanks for listening. Your feedback is appreciated. Please rate and review us on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and by all means, let us know if you have any ideas for a podcast. We'd love to hear from you.
Have you been seeing these memes with the guys from... what's the old motorcycle shop?
Yes,
the custom
yes.
choppers. They're yelling.
Well, that's like my famous quote to guys when they call in. I'm not being disrespectful, but it's like, what do these codes mean? Well, look them up. You know,
Right.
Google. I'm going to do the same thing on my end. So, you know, and some of the codes, it's just they're generic. You hear them all the time. So 3 of the guys in the office are like, dude, this is you. Like, this is you. And I'm like, God, I'm a pile of shit.
True story.